Hi everyone, and it's so nice to see such a good turnout today. And thank you to Siobhan and to the incredible team here for your organisation. And hats off to Siobhan. When Siobhan came to me, we started the Unicorn Foundation Australia in late 2009, and we our paths crossed in about 2012, and she's like a sister from another mister, this one, and she is just such a force to be reckoned with and so incredibly passionate for you guys, and so I couldn't be more proud of you and for everything that you do. So, as Siobhan mentioned, I started the Unicorn Foundation Australia, and I'm current president of the of INCA. Let's not go through the whole title. Which is a really important global collaboration. And I want to talk about that and also talk about some of the global research. This isn't to show you what you don't have, but it's more to show you what is possible, but also with your advocacy, because they don't want to hear from us. Politicians don't want to hear from us. Pharmaceutical companies don't want to hear from us. They want to hear from you as patients. So this is hopefully a little bit of a presentation that gets you a little inspired to see what is possible. So I just wanted to start with, really, I was going to do a timeline of just especially when we first came into this field. And I say my sister had pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer, my youngest brother has von Hippel-Lindau, we're the case study for all of it, and my brother, who's a doctor, and myself started up the foundation. And in that time, we have worked with the European Neuroendocrine Tumour Society, and ENETS has been around for a while. And they really lead the way, as we've spoken about, with Centres of Excellence, which I'll touch on as well. We've also been involved since the inception of the Asia Pacific Neuroendocrine Tumour Society. They had their first meeting, I think, back in 2013 in Kuala Lumpur, and we were there, advocating. NANETS has now come on board, which is the North America group. I know a lot of my friends are like, NANET. There's a lot of acronyms here. There's also the Commonwealth Tumour Collaboration, which is Australia, New Zealand and Canada, and we've seen some great research come out of that. There's now the Chinese study group, the Japan Society, NET initiatives out of South Africa, and UKINETS, which was mentioned as well. So why I wanted to, focus on that is that it's really exciting that it has moved from just our European friends now to a real global, and there's a lot of interest in the medical community on collaborating and getting involved in their countries, but then obviously working together globally as well. So who is INCA? INCA is made up of 20 member organisations, so 20 patient organisations from 17 different countries. So we were first involved as one of the founding members back in 2010 when we were brought together to start raising awareness, because we knew that there was a lot to be done. No one knew what it was, no one knew how to explain it, so that's where World Net Cancer Day came out of. From that, we've really moved a long way. We're now incorporated in America as an actual not-for-profit. We're looking at really trying to empower patients globally. Our vision is to be the global voice of neuroendocrine cancer patients. So really looking at those developing countries such as South America and even in China, and trying to really empower patients to start up patient organisations there, because again, only through these sorts of powerful voices does any change come. So I'll touch on a little bit of some of the research we're doing with that later. So when I was asked to look at international current research, I wanted to look at the current clinical trials. So when I talk about current, and this is literally taken from the clinicaltrials.gov website that we all know is very imperfect. So these are ones that are currently recruiting, not that are closed. So we can see here, we have about 40. It has not really shown there, but apparently there is 7 in New Zealand. There's a large amount there in North America. But when you actually delve really deeper into, when I actually really looked at the sites here, there's a little bit of crossing. So these numbers aren't really true numbers. But what I thought was important, that at least they're happening. But we want to see so many more there. When I actually did the map of actual just neuroendocrine, like just doing a search on that, there was obviously so many more, but it does actually list all the closed ones as well, so I took them out. So I just wanted to really talk about some of the trials that I actually have a vested interest or I actually know about, and ones that we really, really want to bring here to New Zealand as well. So this is a really interesting one, this phase 1 study that's happening out of South Australia with one of our Professor Tim Price there, and that's actually and I say phase 1, I mean obviously we want, and it's complicated, there's phase 1, there's phase 2, phase 3, but we're wanting as many phase 1 trials opening as possible. And this is looking at a chemical dye called rose bengal, and originally it was used to colour wool and wood red, which is interesting. But they're looking at this as injecting into liver metastases of nets. And it's actually really shown some good results so far in this phase 1 trial. So it's actually stopped tumour growth, but most importantly, it's tried to alleviate some of these painful symptoms such as nausea and diarrhoea as well. So obviously our clinicians are very focused on trying to get the best quality of life for you. Obviously our end goal is a cure, that's absolutely without question. But what else can we be doing along the way to try and give you the best quality of life as well? So that's an interesting one that's only sort of started at the end of last year. One that we have we're actually completely funded, the Unicorn Foundation's completely funded or found funding for, is the Control Nets trial. And I know that Ben was talking about the in that MDM case, he was talking about, well, no, PRRT wasn't appropriate, so they went to CAPTEM or temozolomide, the chemotherapy. So this is a trial that we sadly never got government funding for, but we are closing it with about 75 patients on there. It's a randomised trial looking at chemotherapy, so it's 3-arm, chemotherapy, PRRT by itself, and then combination therapy as well. And this again is something as a trial is looked upon around the world when we're trying to compare whether to go with chemotherapy, with PRRT, or should we be putting them into combination as well. So I know that globally they're looking forward to the results of that. The other one I wanted to mention is, because there's a lot of talk about, what else except for the treatments that we already know about. This is another phase 2 trial that's going on in Australia, and it's looking at, we're doing a lot more, I did write basket case, which Kate actually really corrected me on before, which is good. It's obviously showing I'm not, didn't get much sleep last night, but it's basket trials. So getting neuroendocrine tumour patients, because of our numbers, we can't compete against the breast, we can't compete against the melanoma, especially with the big randomised clinical trials. So what are we going to do to try and get these trials started? So in Australia, we're really, really pushing for basket trials where neuroendocrine is included as part of the bigger patient group. So this particular trial is looking at PD-1 inhibitors, and it's a really interesting place in Australia at the moment, especially when we're looking at drugs to be reimbursed on our pharmaceutical benefit scheme, is rather than looking at cancer by cancer, should we be looking at the molecular breakdown of a tumour, and if all those patients that have PD-1 or they're showing promise in that area, how can we actually start getting as much access to these drugs as possible? So we're going to be seeing a lot more of these trials, which is very exciting, and NETS is included in that. I won't go in the next one, but the one that there's another one here comparing PRRT with everolimus, again, a drug that's not necessarily available here, but as I just said to Malcolm, is we hope that all the work that we're doing with the clinical trials in PRRT in Australia will make the protocols and the treatment plans here in New Zealand, when it comes up and going, the best it possibly can, because there's a lot of groundwork going on at the moment. And one that we also seed funded, which I was very happy that the government actually funded to 1.5 million, which is the NABNEC study, and that's combination therapy for our neuroendocrine carcinoma grade 3 patients, because we know that there's very few treatment options, so we know we need to do a lot more in that area for those patients. So I just wanted to show you this because this was, I thought, a really great slide and something that we don't have available in Australia, but this was something out of the UK, and you can just literally do a search and find out where the different studies are and what trials are open, and you'll see there the COMPETE one, which is actually open in Australia. So that's a global trial, which we're happy about. The spin net one we wanted to happen, but I think it hasn't, which is comparing lanreotide for lung net. But you can see there the different ones going along the different regions and the different grading as well. So what does this all mean? So I wanted to look at, what, how, when, and what does it mean for you guys most importantly? That's all that matters. So that's the what's going on. How are we actually making that happen? So we've lobbied a lot with currently, thankfully, I know I'm getting videoed. Our Federal Health Minister, Minister Greg Hunt, has been very, very supportive of rare cancers in Australia. And through that, he's funded more than $50 million into the Medical Research Future Fund. And we literally just last week had confirmation of nearly $2 million grant for Merkel cell carcinoma, which when you think Merkel cell is a very rare subset of NETs, this is a really exciting space as well. And we hope that any findings that we have in those rare tumours will have a knock-on effect as well. We're obviously lobbying also our National Health and Medical Research. We've been able to get funding from organisations like Tour de Cure, but we also really push pharmaceutical and industry. Unfortunately, where we sit in the world, as well as New Zealand, we can't really influence what goes on at a global level. Clinical trials in pharmaceutical and decided at a global level. So we usually get things that are sort of, might happen or not happen. So I think we're really seeing that change, and I really hope that we become a bit of a force, especially around PRT. We just also, at our newly appointed Centre of Excellence, the first Centre of Excellence outside of Europe is Peter Mac, and that was announced a couple of months ago, which we're very, very excited about. And one that we were really excited that as part of the audit that the ENETs did, the Unicorn Foundation was presented at that, showing our resources and showing how we work in a symbiotic relationship with Peter Mac. So we provide the support in the community and how we work with them in the clinic. So we're very excited that Peter Mac has been attributed that. I mean, nowhere else in the world except for in Europe has that been accredited. So we're very excited about that. But what we're also excited is our Professor Rod Hicks was also just granted $1.5 million to do a global clinical trial on PRT in looking at all the different other options. So we've seen that Compete is comparing it to everolimus, but he's got all these other options that he can look at. So that's a really exciting thing. And again, anything that we here, have going on in Australia, we really hope to roll out in New Zealand as soon as possible. As soon as Siobhan does her hard work and gets that up and running, we'll be on the doorstep asking, how can we help and get these trials open? No pressure at all. So that's sort of the how, and I guess I wanted to especially emphasise the importance of lobbying. It's the power of the people and the power of our voice that has really helped to try and get NETs on the agenda at a federal and state level. So I just wanted to quickly also talk about some of the research that we've done at INCA. Again, why? Because this puts our research priorities in place. So we're working with ENETs and NANETs and all the different global collaborations to put the patient's research priorities on the cards. We know we did a survey last year on the unmet needs. We know that there's a huge disparity between especially with information, what the patient believes they get, and I know you mentioned what the patient believes the information they get compared to what the clinician actually feels that they're giving. So there was like an 86% difference on the needs that are met. So we're looking at how can we close that gap. There's obviously lots of variables about diagnosis and at time of diagnosis, but how can we deliver the information better along that treatment plan as well, that it's absorbed by everybody, and how can the clinicians deliver it better as well? So we're looking at trying to close that information gap. Obviously, we're looking at securing more support for NET research. So we're doing that with INCA. We're trying to do that at a global level, whether it's with the EU, whether it's for us at a national level as well. But even working with the World Health Organization or the Union for International Cancer Control, trying to get NETs really up on the page. We're also advocating for greater access. One of the key things that obviously came out of this survey was access to PRRT and gallium PET. And so you're not alone. It's obviously, a worldwide thing. Only recently has America had FDA approval for a form of PRRT. So it's a global problem, and we want equitable access across the board. What we also want to see is greater collaboration. So one thing that we're doing in Australia, which we're excited that we'll be launching soon, is our registry, our Planet Registry. So we'll have it firstly at Peter Mac and then rolled out to the other key institutions, a database. We need data. We need it to be universally available to guide and drive more research as well. As part of that registry, we're really excited that we'll have a patient app where patients will be delivering their quality of life, their Bristol scale, all their different information directly into this research registry. So that will just build so much more evidence. It'll allow us to take it to government to show what are the huge unmet needs for our NET patients as well, directly from the patients. We really want to raise awareness about MDT care or these centres of excellence. It should be standard practice that every hospital that sees a certain amount of NET patients has an MDM. And it was great to see this morning. As I tweeted, it was like telling patients how decisions are made are the best way for patients to actually understand how their treatment plans. And I think clearing that communication and making that communication better has huge ramifications for how you guys live with the disease, and how successful treatments can be as well, and obviously secure resources. So none of this is new, but it's at a global level. We're trying to get published. We have white papers. The global survey that you can see out there that we did a few years ago, and that was Oceania data there, that did make huge inroads, especially in the greater cancer community. It really was presented at all the big, Clinical Oncology Society of Australia. It was ASCO, the American meetings. So it really does make a huge effort or a huge importance when we actually have patient data presented at these big cancer meetings as well. As I said, so what does it all mean? The patients, we want a cure. But we can only get a cure through research, and we can only have research with clinical trials and funding. I think it's also, there was a statistic that in this unmet needs is that, very few, even though the doctors said that they've got however many clinical trials open, very few patients were ever offered them. So we need to get better registries available to tell people where these clinical trials are. Even the doctors that should know these clinical trials are open don't necessarily tell the patients about them. So that's a huge global problem, and it's everywhere, but we need to get it better. Only through advocacy. So this is a part-time organisation, so we need patient power and we need patient support. And I think we've seen such a difference over this short time, but Pharmac's a different kettle of fish to deal with. So I think, only through you guys, you vote for these people. You've got to, put your hand up and say it's not good enough. There is a lot of global collaboration, and New Zealand with Siobhan is at the heart of that. We need greater funding, but most important to you guys is we want to make sure you're getting the supportive care, and we're doing a lot of research around, there's a research piece we're doing out of Peter Mac as well called Defining Nets, and looking at the psychosocial needs of patients with functioning and non-functioning. Too often where our patients are telling us, it's a good-looking cancer, my family doesn't understand that I'm sick. They don't, there's a lot of issues, and I know, we just see it in our Facebook group and them talking about, I can't even bring it up with my family anymore, or my friends don't believe me that I'm sick. So how can we work that out better? I mean, how can we deliver services or education to carers, family? What can we do better to help you guys live with this as well? So that's sort of it in a nutshell, but to let you know there is a lot, and it's changed so much from in the last 10 years. We've seen so many more options. We just want to see them here, and we're going to make sure that they get to you here. And through, again, you guys actually putting up your hands, talking about it. Hashtag Let's Talk About NETs is the campaign for Net Cancer Day. It's one day, but if you can just tell your story, that's all that matters, is telling your story. This is how the breast cancer people got a lot of funding. This is how the prostate cancer, they told their stories. We need to tell our stories as well. So thank you. And by being here, this is a huge step, and thank you very much. So is there any questions?
I understand that some of the states in Australia don't recommend PRRT or help it. Is that correct?
It used to be like that. So we lobbied very, very hard, the New South Wales state government, for funding, and we actually secured ongoing funding for 100 patients in New South Wales. We even just had a little hiccup the other day finding out that ACT patients who should be covered, that's Canberra patients that should be covered in New South Wales, weren't being covered. So we've actually rectified that problem. But pretty much it is available in each state, and when it's not, and we get patients to ask, to talk to us, we've had issues in different states, but we've tried to rectify it as much as possible. But you're right, it's sort of always like this, but in general it's available if needed.
Does that harm your credibility with the decision makers?
No, I don't think so, because what we're doing is it's available, but we're building evidence. I guess it's a catch-22 also, because they're overseas. It's been, it's a pharmaceutical drug through a particular pharmaceutical company that's been able to get FDA approval and that sort of thing. Do we want that in Australia? There's questions to that, because it might decrease the availability, especially around costs. And we have one payer, like you guys have it, one payer with Pharmac. It will be negotiating the costs of that. So at the moment, it's available, but we also want as many trials available as well. But it is available not only on trial. But it is always a questionable one, but we do try and get it as much as possible.